Think Like a Philosopher. How Ancient Wisdom Solves Modern Problems, written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. Your phone buzzes. The news is bad, again. A dozen tabs are open. Your mind races. Somewhere between inboxes and algorithms, you feel it, that tug of exhaustion, the quiet question. Is this how life is supposed to feel? You're not alone. The modern world moves fast, demands more, and rarely stops to ask why. We're overwhelmed with information but starved for wisdom. We know how to optimize, monetize, and scale, but not how to think, not deeply, not clearly, not for ourselves. That's where this book begins. Not with new answers, but with ancient questions. Not with hacks, but with habits of thought. Because long before social media, side hustles, or burnout, human beings were asking the same things. What matters? Who am I becoming? How do I live well in a world I can't control? The philosophers weren't cloistered monks lost in abstractions. They were real people facing war, exile, poverty, politics, and loss. They weren't perfect. But they paid attention. They slowed down enough to wrestle with meaning, and to leave us a trail of insight that's more relevant now than ever. Philosophy isn't about memorizing names or quoting Plato at a party. It's about learning to think with more clarity, to choose with more intention, and to live with more courage. It's about finding stillness in the chaos, direction in the noise, and wisdom in the questions we often avoid. As motivational speaker Jim Rohn once said, "You cannot change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction." That's what this book offers, a new direction. Not a self-help sprint, but a quiet walk with some of history's wisest minds, Marcus Aurelius, Confucius, Aristotle, Laozi, and others. Each chapter a lantern lighting the next step forward. If you're tired of reacting and ready to reflect, if you're hungry for meaning, not just motion, this book is for you. You don't need to become a philosopher. You just need to start thinking like one. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Mastering the Mind, Marcus Aurelius and the Art of Inner Control. On a bitter morning in 175 AD, the most powerful man in the world sat alone in a war tent, wrapped in a threadbare cloak, scribbling in a journal. The empire was cracking at the edges, his body ached. His advisors whispered of rebellion. But Marcus Aurelius wasn't mapping battle lines, he was writing himself a reminder. You have power over your mind, not over the chaos around you. Realize this, and you'll find your strength. Fast forward to now. You're in traffic, running late, your phone buzzing with notifications. You scroll through headlines, wars, recessions, climate crises. Control feels like a joke. The world floods in faster than you can process it. Stress builds like pressure behind your eyes. In this noise, the Stoic emperor whispers across time, focus inward, not as an escape, but as your only reliable power. Marcus didn't live in a monastery. He was the most powerful man in the world, burdened with responsibility, and surrounded by chaos. If anyone had the right to blame his circumstances, it was him, but he didn't. He turned his mind into a fortress, not by suppressing emotion, but by disciplining interpretation. When events happen, we choose what they mean. Today we mistake reaction for strength. We let a rude email hijack our mood. We panic over things we can't control. We burn out chasing control over people, timelines, even the weather. Marcus would say, you're aiming at the wrong target. The battlefield is internal. If you can govern your thoughts, nothing external can master you. Consider this shift. Instead of why is this happening to me? Ask, what does this reveal about me? That's not weakness, it's clarity. Inner control isn't ignoring reality. It's meeting reality on your terms. It's pausing before the spiral, questioning your story, and choosing a response instead of defaulting to one. In practical terms, thinking like a Stoic means building space between stimulus and response. Your coworker criticizes your idea. Your heart jumps. You want to defend, snap, withdraw. Instead, you breathe. You name the emotion, embarrassment. You ask, is my worth tied to this moment? Then you choose. Maybe you clarify your idea. Maybe you let it go. But you don't become the emotion. That's the Stoic power move. In a world that profits from your outrage and fear, calm is rebellion. You don't have to be passive. You don't have to accept injustice. Marcus didn't. But he knew that a reactive mind is easily manipulated. Mastering the mind isn't the end of action, it's the beginning of right action. This mindset doesn't require a toga or a throne, it requires a choice, again and again. A choice to direct your focus where your agency lives, and to say, I won't give my peace to something I cannot change, to protect your attention like a scarce resource, and to train your mind not to flinch at discomfort, but to interpret it wisely. You won't always get it right. Marcus didn't either. That's why his journal, later published as Meditations, reads like a man reminding himself, not preaching to others. That's our model, not perfection, but practice. Inner strength isn't gifted, it's built. Marcus couldn't stop wars or disease or betrayal, but he could stop the war inside his mind. So can you. When the noise rises, go inward, ask better questions. Choose better meanings, respond, don't react. That's how philosophy becomes power. You can't control most events, but you can control your interpretation. Reaction is instinct. Response is choice. Calm isn't passive, it's power in disguise. Where in your life are you reacting to what you could be reframing? Today, when something irritates you, pause. Name the feeling. Ask, what else could this mean? Choose your response. Chapter 2. Less is more. Epicurus and the joy of simplicity. Imagine sitting in a small garden on the edge of Athens. A group of friends shares bread, olives, and simple wine. They laugh, debate, and reflect. No one is wealthy. No one boasts. This was the school of Epicurus, not a palace of indulgence, but a retreat of restraint. He wrote, If you wish to be rich, do not add to your money, but subtract from your desires. That's not what we're taught. Today we scroll through curated lifestyles and hustle culture mantras. We're told success is more followers, more stuff, more ambition, yet for all our abundance, anxiety thrives. We have more access and feel less satisfied. We chase comfort and feel no peace. Epicurus would call this the hunger of mistaken desires. He believed that true happiness wasn't in constant pleasure, but in lasting tranquility. And tranquility begins with clarity. What do you actually need to be well? A roof, nourishment, friendship, time to think. These aren't luxuries, they're foundations. But modern life teaches us to overlook them while chasing more abstract trophies, status, image, comparison, and driven goals. Epicurus was slandered even in his own time, painted as a hedonist by those who misunderstood him. But he was precise. There are natural and necessary desires like food and shelter. There are natural but unnecessary ones, like luxury. And then there are vain desires like fame and power. It's the third category that derails us. Not because ambition is evil, but because chasing vanity often increases pain. Consider how many decisions today are driven not by joy, but by comparison. We buy things not because we need them, but because someone else has them. We overcommit not out of purpose, but out of fear of missing out. We eat to numb, scroll to escape, and accumulate to feel secure. But none of these strategies deliver peace, they exhaust us. Epicurus offers an alternative: find joy in sufficiency. That doesn't mean settling for mediocrity. It means defining enough from within, rather than outsourcing it to the world. He wasn't against pleasure, he just believed that the highest pleasure is peace of mind, and peace comes from understanding what matters most. Try this thought experiment. If all you had today was a quiet moment, a full belly, and someone to speak honestly with, would that be enough? Most of us have more than that, and yet feel less. Why? Because craving has no finish line. The more you chase, the more elusive contentment becomes. The trick is not to renounce all wants, but to examine them. Simplicity is not minimalism as aesthetic, it's minimalism as clarity. It's the discipline to say no to what looks good so you can say yes to what nourishes. It's not anti-success, it's pro-purpose. It asks you to trade noise for depth, distraction for direction. In practice, Epicurean living might look like leaving your phone behind on a walk, cooking a slow meal, saying no to an invitation that drains you, cleaning out the garage, not to impress, but to breathe easier. The reward is subtle but profound, the feeling of being enough, with enough, in a moment that asks nothing more of you than your presence. Epicurus lived simply, died peacefully, and left behind a philosophy not of denial, but of discernment. The world still pushes more. But joy? Joy may always whisper less. True pleasure comes from simplicity, not excess. Examine your desires, some aren't yours to carry. Peace of mind begins where comparison ends. What is one thing you've been chasing that might not actually lead to peace? Choose one desire today: buying, scrolling, comparing, and pause. Ask, do I need this, or am I trying to fill something else? Chapter 3. The Balance Cure. Aristotle's Golden Mean and the End of Extremes. A soldier stands at the edge of battle. If he runs, he's a coward. If he charges without strategy, he's reckless. But if he waits, watches, calculates, then steps forward with courage and caution, he embodies virtue. This, for Aristotle, is the golden mean, the sweet spot between too much and too little, where wisdom lives and human flourishing begins. We live in a world of overcorrecting. We hustle until we burn out, then retreat into avoidance. We diet strictly, then binge. We work tirelessly, then crash. Our culture applauds the extremes: grind culture, all or nothing mindsets, black or white thinking. But extremes rarely sustain us. They distort us. Aristotle argued that virtue, true excellence in living, is always a balance between excess and deficiency. Take courage, for example. Too little, and you live in fear. Too much, and you become reckless. Generosity? Too little is selfishness. Too much is self-sacrifice to the point of harm. Honesty? Too little, and you're deceitful. Too much, and you become brutally insensitive. The golden mean isn't mediocrity, it's mastery. It requires judgment, self-awareness, and constant recalibration. Aristotle didn't preach easy answers. He believed that virtue is learned through doing, just as you build strength by lifting weights, not reading about it. He called this practical wisdom, the ability to make the right decision in the right moment for the right reason. And like any skill, it's forged through trial, reflection, and habit. Today, balance feels radical. Social media rewards outrage, workplaces reward overwork. Relationships often polarize into appeasing or dominating, but when we live at the edges, we erode resilience. We snap instead of stretch. We obsess or avoid. The golden mean calls us to pause and ask, what's the wise middle here? Imagine a manager navigating conflict. Avoiding it makes things fester. Confronting it aggressively creates fear. But addressing it directly, calmly, with empathy, that's the mean. Or consider parenting. Permissiveness leads to chaos. Authoritarianism breeds rebellion. But engaged, consistent guidance, that's the balance. This thinking applies everywhere: ambition versus contentment, expression versus listening, planning versus spontaneity. The key is recognizing when you're leaning too far in one direction. This takes self-inquiry. Am I reacting or responding? Am I doing this out of fear or wisdom? Am I clinging to certainty or staying curious? These questions don't paralyze, they refine. It's tempting to think balance is boring. But nothing about it is passive. It's one of the most demanding and dynamic ways to live. It means staying awake to your motives. It means resisting the seductive pull of overdoing. It means accepting that what's too much today may be just right tomorrow, depending on context. Balance is alive. It breathes with you. Practicing the golden mean isn't about getting it perfect. It's about becoming someone who can feel the tension between opposites and navigate wisely. That's what Aristotle meant by flourishing, not happiness as a fleeting emotion, but eudaimonia, the deep well-being that comes from living with purpose, integrity, and skill. So next time you're pulled toward the edge, whether in work, conversation, emotion, or ambition, step back. Find the middle path, not as a compromise, but as a commitment to clarity. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. The golden mean is the balance point between excess and deficiency. Virtue isn't static, it adapts with context and requires practice. Balance is not boring, it's the core of a well-lived life. Where in your life are you swinging between extremes instead of practicing balance? Choose one area, work, relationships, or habits, and ask, what does the wise middle look like today? Chapter 4. Know Thyself. Socratic Questioning in an Age of Noise. In the crowded agora of ancient Athens, Socrates would stop strangers mid-stride. He didn't sell anything or shout for attention, he asked questions, not to trap, but to awaken. What is justice? What makes a life good? His method was unsettling, not because it confused people, but because it revealed how little they truly understood about their own beliefs. Now picture your morning. A scroll through headlines, emails, and algorithm-driven opinions. So much input, so little reflection. We're flooded with answers before we've asked a single question. We chase certainty, mimic influencers, copy productivity hacks, yet grow more disconnected from what we really think, feel, and need. Socrates would raise an eyebrow. He believed unexamined opinions weren't just misguided, they were dangerous. To know thyself isn't navel-gazing. It's a daily discipline. It starts by slowing down the rush to react, to fix, to prove. Socrates wasn't looking for perfect answers. He was after better questions. He understood that clarity lives just beyond the edge of our assumptions. And most people defend their assumptions more fiercely than they defend truth. In today's world, asking deep questions can feel inconvenient. It delays action. It disrupts momentum, but that discomfort is the doorway. When we pause to ask, why am I doing this? Or what belief is driving this emotion? We turn autopilot into awareness. Most people want results. Few want reflection. Yet without reflection, results often ring hollow. Consider someone chasing a promotion. The goal seems noble. But pause, why that job? Why that title? Is it aligned with their values? Or are they driven by status, approval, fear of inadequacy? Without interrogation, ambition can become a mask for anxiety. Socratic thinking isn't about killing ambition, it's about purifying it. The magic of this method is its simplicity. You start with what seems obvious. I want to be successful. Socrates would ask, what is success? You answer, doing meaningful work and being respected. He'd follow, what makes work meaningful? And who defines respect? In just a few turns, your vague desire becomes a mirror, reflecting what truly matters. This isn't just theory. You can use this every day. Before making a decision, ask, what do I really want here? Then, why? Then, is that really true? Repeat until the answer feels unshakably yours, not inherited, not imposed. It's uncomfortable at first, but clarity always requires excavation. In relationships, Socratic thinking prevents conflict from spiraling. Instead of reacting with, how could they do that? Try, what story am I telling myself about their behavior? In creativity, it fuels originality. Instead of copying trends, ask, what do I uniquely want to express? In burnout, it provides relief. Instead of pushing harder, ask, what am I afraid will happen if I rest? Socrates wasn't a guru. He claimed to know nothing, that humility was his power. In an era addicted to instant expertise, his example is rare. He taught that wisdom begins not with knowing, but with the courage to admit what you don't know, and the curiosity to explore it without judgment. To think like a philosopher means becoming your own guide, not relying on others to define your values, your goals, your truth. It's not rebellion, it's responsibility. And in a noisy world, it's one of the most liberating choices you can make. Asking better questions leads to deeper clarity and freedom. Self-knowledge is not a luxury, it's a foundation for wise action. Socratic humility makes space for true growth. What belief or assumption have you never questioned that might be shaping your life? Pick one current goal and ask yourself, why do I want this? 3 times. Follow each answer deeper until the core reason becomes clear. Chapter 5. The Leadership Mirror, Confucius on Character and Influence. In the Analects of Confucius, there's a line that seems almost too simple. To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must first put the family in order. To put the family in order, we must first cultivate our personal life. At first glance, it sounds like a call to domestic harmony, but read it again, and it becomes something deeper, a blueprint for leadership that begins with self. We often think of leadership as a title, a role, a position of control. But for Confucius, leadership was a reflection. You don't command others into better behavior. You embody it. The highest form of influence comes not from authority, but from integrity. In that light, every person is a leader, not because they manage a team, but because their choices ripple outward into their family, their workplace, and their community. Think of modern leadership failures, scandals, corruption, manipulation. These aren't flaws in skill, they're flaws in character. Confucius would say those failures began long before the headlines. They began when the person neglected self-discipline, dismissed small wrongs, and chased external success without inner alignment. In his eyes, character isn't ornamental, it's structural. Now think about your own life. Maybe you're not in charge of a company or a movement, but someone looks to you. A child, a coworker, a friend. You set a tone. You create emotional weather. The way you speak, act, and respond teaches others how to do the same. Leadership isn't something you switch on, it's something you reveal through consistency. Confucius emphasized 5 core virtues: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faithfulness. These weren't abstract ideals, they were daily practices. Benevolence is how you treat people when you're tired. Righteousness is choosing what's right over what's easy. Propriety is respecting boundaries and customs without superiority. Wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Faithfulness is being who you say you are, even when no one's watching. In a culture that rewards image over substance, Confucian leadership feels revolutionary. It asks you to stop managing perception and start managing your soul. Not because others are watching, but because the integrity of your life matters. When you practice virtue, you create trust, and trust is the currency of true influence. There's a quiet power in modeling what you wish others would do. A parent who apologizes, a manager who listens, a friend who holds a boundary with kindness. These moments don't trend, but they transform. Confucius believed that if enough people lived this way, harmony would ripple through society. Not by force, but by example. This doesn't mean being perfect. It means being willing to examine yourself before criticizing others, willing to own your impact, willing to grow, even when no one applauds. That's the mirror of leadership, not how others see you, but how clearly you can see yourself. When you lead with character, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. Your life speaks for you. And in a time where trust is fractured and noise is endless, that kind of quiet authority is more urgent than ever. True leadership begins with inner character, not external control. Influence is earned through consistency, trust, and integrity. You are always leading someone, by how you live. Where in your life are you expecting others to change before modeling that change yourself? Choose one virtue, patience, honesty, kindness, and practice it intentionally today in a small moment of influence. Chapter 6. Stillness over stimulation, Zeno and the power of restraint. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, taught on a painted porch in the heart of Athens. It wasn't a quiet retreat. It was a busy marketplace, filled with noise, trade, and distraction. Yet that's where he taught restraint. Not in isolation, but in the midst of chaos. His philosophy wasn't about escape, it was about composure. Stoicism was forged in noise to help people find stillness within it. Today, stimulation is constant. Notifications, headlines, algorithms pulling at your attention. It's not just the volume, it's the pace. Everything is urgent. Every ping is a priority. The more we feed it, the more it demands. And slowly, without noticing, we begin to live reactively, scrolling instead of choosing, responding instead of reflecting, consuming instead of contemplating. Zeno would see this as a loss of agency, not because we're busy but because we're unexamined. Restraint, in his teaching, was not suppression. It was power. The ability to pause when provoked, to observe a desire without obeying it, to choose stillness when noise is an option. That's not weakness. That's freedom. Most people think freedom means doing what you want. Stoicism flips that. Real freedom is not being ruled by what you want, it's the space between impulse and action. Without that space, we become slaves to craving. To be free is to be able to say no, not just to what harms us, but to what distracts us from who we want to be. Imagine getting an angry email. Your chest tightens, you want to defend, fire back, prove your point. But a Stoic doesn't react in the heat. They wait. They observe. They ask, what part of me is being threatened right now? Then they choose. Not silence out of fear, not retaliation out of ego, but a response that aligns with character, not emotion. Restraint is also about presence. When we're constantly stimulated, we miss our own lives. We check out. Moments blur. Meals become scroll sessions. Conversations are half attended. And yet we wonder why life feels shallow. Zeno would say, because we're not in it. We're skimming existence instead of living it. Stillness doesn't mean inactivity. It means clarity in action. It means slowing down enough to ask, is this worth my time? It means being intentional about what you allow into your mind. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every opinion needs a rebuttal. Not every urge needs indulging. Stillness is a filter, not a prison. You can practice this in small ways. The next time you reach for your phone without thinking, stop. Ask what you're avoiding. When you feel the urge to interrupt, don't. When you want to fill silence with noise, let the silence speak. These moments aren't glamorous, but they're where self-mastery is built. Zeno didn't seek applause. He taught people how to govern themselves. That's leadership. That's depth. And in a world that equates stimulation with significance, choosing restraint is revolutionary. It's not about being above emotion. It's about not being dragged around by it. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing the right thing, at the right time, for the right reason. Stillness isn't a retreat from the world. It's how you show up fully in it, anchored, aware, and free. Restraint is not suppression, it's strength in stillness. Freedom is the ability to pause before you act. Stillness invites presence, clarity, and agency. What would happen if you responded to tension with a pause instead of a reaction? Today, choose one moment to pause, before replying, buying, posting, or reacting. Breathe. Then act with intention. Chapter 7. What really matters, Seneca and the economics of time. Seneca, a Roman philosopher and statesman, once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." He wasn't speaking in abstractions. He had been exiled, accused, nearly executed. Time was not theoretical to him, it was urgent. And yet he saw how people squandered it as if it were infinite, handing it out to strangers, distractions, and fears, while guarding their money like treasure. Today we still treat time like it's free. We let our calendars fill with obligations we don't value. We binge shows out of boredom. We scroll until we're numb. Then we say we don't have time for the things that matter: conversations, reflection, rest. Seneca would call this a tragic miscalculation. You can lose money and earn it back. You can lose status and rebuild it. But lost time is unrecoverable. Every moment spent is gone forever. That's not meant to scare you. It's meant to awaken you. Modern life doesn't just steal time, it erodes how we value it. Busyness has become a badge of honor. If you say you're tired, people nod. If you say you took a nap, they raise an eyebrow. Productivity is praised, even when it's aimless. We confuse motion with meaning. But Seneca challenges that. He asks, are you actually living, or just passing time? He believed the good life was not found in longevity, but in intentionality. A short, well-lived life is more complete than a long life spent in distraction. This isn't about cramming more in. It's about asking what's worth your limited hours, what relationships, what pursuits, what values. If time is your most precious resource, what are you investing it in? Think of your calendar. Who filled it? You might say work demands it. Family needs you. Society expects you to show up. And yes, responsibilities are real. But how often do we say yes reflexively, without checking whether the yes aligns with our deeper purpose? Seneca didn't advocate selfishness. He advocated sovereignty. The courage to choose where your time flows. Time management often focuses on efficiency, scheduling hacks, to-do lists, automation. But what if the goal isn't to do more, faster? What if it's to do fewer things better? What if success isn't about how much you fit in, but how much you enjoy and value what you do? This philosophy isn't rigid. It's freeing. It gives you permission to say no. It reminds you that rest isn't laziness, that play isn't waste, that silence isn't empty. Seneca argued that leisure, when used for thought and reflection, was the highest use of time, not passive lounging, but active contemplation, a walk without your phone, a journal before bed, a conversation without agenda. If you knew you had 5 years left, not out of fear, but out of fact, what would you stop doing? What would you double down on? Most people avoid this question because it's uncomfortable, but that discomfort is a compass. It points to what truly matters. Seneca died wealthy, but warned against wealth as a substitute for wisdom. He had access to power, but didn't equate it with peace. He understood the hidden cost of a distracted life. You don't just lose time. You lose yourself inside it, and by the time you realize what matters, it may be too late to give it the time it deserves. So start now. Guard your time like your life depends on it, because it does. Time is your most valuable and unrecoverable resource. Intentional living matters more than busy living. Saying no to distraction is saying yes to what truly matters. What's one activity or commitment that consumes your time but adds little value? Review your calendar or task list. Remove or reschedule one item that doesn't align with what matters most to you. Chapter 8. The Compass Within. Diogenes and the Courage to Live Authentically. Diogenes lived in a barrel, not because he had to, but because he chose to. He walked barefoot, carried no possessions, and once, when offered a lavish home, declined with a smirk. When Alexander the Great approached him and asked if there was anything he could do for him, Diogenes reportedly replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." That wasn't arrogance, it was clarity. Diogenes didn't want anything he hadn't freely chosen, and that's what made him dangerous in the best way. In a world obsessed with appearance, Diogenes chose authenticity, not as rebellion, but as alignment. He stripped away everything society said he needed to be happy: wealth, fame, comfort, and tested whether joy could be found in simplicity, in truth, in being fully himself. He wasn't polished, he wasn't diplomatic, but he was free. Authenticity today is often confused with self-expression. Post a quote, wear something bold, say what's on your mind, but Diogenes challenges us to go deeper. Authenticity isn't about showing more. It's about shedding what isn't real. The expectations you absorbed but never questioned, the roles you play because they're safe, the opinions you repeat because they earn approval. Modern life rewards conformity dressed up as uniqueness. We're encouraged to be ourselves, as long as it fits inside a branded box. Diogenes refused the box altogether. He didn't seek permission to be real. He claimed it. And in doing so, he forced others to question what they were clinging to. But this isn't about becoming a provocateur. You don't need to live in a barrel or insult kings. You need to listen to your own voice beneath the noise. That voice might not be loud. It might whisper. But it knows. It knows when you're saying yes out of fear. It knows when you're laughing to belong. It knows when you're betraying your values to stay comfortable. And the more you ignore it, the harder life becomes, not because you're failing, but because you're drifting. Authenticity requires risk. It means disappointing people. It means leaving roles that don't fit. It means telling the truth even when it costs you something. But the price of inauthenticity is steeper: anxiety, resentment, exhaustion. It's the weight of living a life that looks right but feels wrong. Diogenes reminds us that freedom begins within. You can have all the markers of success and still be trapped. You can have little and be fully alive. The key isn't minimalism, it's honesty. Ask yourself, what have I accepted as truth that might actually be a cage? What do I pretend to want because it's easier than saying what I really want? What am I afraid would happen if I showed up as I am? You don't have to answer all at once. Start small. Tell the truth in a conversation where you'd normally stay silent. Decline an invitation that doesn't align with your values. Wear what you like, not what's expected. These acts of alignment may seem minor, but they build a life rooted in integrity. Diogenes didn't leave behind a polished doctrine. He left a challenge. Can you face the world with nothing to hide and nothing to prove? Can you stop performing and start living, not recklessly, not defiantly, but honestly? That's the compass within, and if you follow it, you might just find a freedom no one can take from you. Authenticity isn't performance, it's alignment with your true self. Living truthfully often means letting go of what others expect. Freedom begins when you stop pretending. What part of yourself have you been hiding or editing to meet others' expectations? Today, make one small choice that reflects your true values, even if it goes against the norm. Chapter 9. Facing the Void. Existentialists and the Freedom and Responsibility. In 1942, Albert Camus published The Myth of Sisyphus, where he compared life to a man pushing a boulder uphill forever, only to watch it roll back down each time. It sounds bleak. But to Camus, the absurdity of it all was the very beginning of freedom. If life has no pre-written meaning, then we are free to create our own. That's the heart of existential philosophy. No one is coming to save you, and that's your opportunity. We're told from a young age that life follows a script. Do well in school, get a job, build a life, be happy. But what happens when you follow the script and still feel empty? Or when the world disrupts your plans with illness, loss, or change? Existentialists like Camus, Kierkegaard, and Sartre didn't offer comforting illusions. They asked us to look directly into the void of uncertainty and take responsibility anyway. Most people run from the void. They stay busy, distracted, entertained. But avoidance doesn't equal peace. Beneath the surface, the questions still hum. What am I doing here? Does this matter? Who am I becoming? Existentialism invites us to stop pretending and face those questions with honesty, even if no tidy answers appear. This isn't about despair. It's about clarity. When you stop waiting for life to hand you meaning, you realize you have the power and the burden to make it yourself. Freedom, Sartre said, is terrifying because it means you can't blame fate. You can't wait for permission. You must choose, act, and own the consequences. That responsibility can feel heavy, but it's also liberating. If meaning isn't given, then it's forged through action, through commitment, through deciding what matters and living like it does. Viktor Frankl, who survived a concentration camp, wrote that life's meaning can be discovered in love, in work, and in suffering, if we approach it with intention. His message wasn't abstract, it was lived. You don't have to face extreme conditions to apply this, you just have to stop outsourcing purpose. Ask yourself, what values do I want to embody? What kind of life feels worth the struggle? Who am I, when no one else is watching? These aren't easy questions, but they're yours to ask and answer. Existential thinking doesn't mean isolating yourself in a room and pondering endlessly. It means waking up to your freedom, then using it, choosing presence over autopilot, creating art not for fame, but because it feels true, building a relationship not because it completes you, but because it challenges and grows you, choosing to stay, or to leave, based on what aligns with your inner compass, not what's expected. Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith, not religious dogma, but a personal, existential choice to live authentically, knowing you can't guarantee outcomes. That leap requires courage. It also requires forgiveness of yourself, of your past, of the future for being unknown. Existentialism doesn't promise safety, it promises truth. And truth is where real life begins, not in certainty, but in conviction, not in control, but in responsibility. When you face the void and don't look away, you don't find nothing. You find yourself. Life doesn't come with meaning, you must create it through your choices. Freedom is powerful, but it also demands responsibility. Facing uncertainty is the first step toward living with conviction. Where in your life are you waiting for meaning instead of creating it? Today, choose one small action, something creative, honest, or purposeful, that reflects the kind of life you want to build. Chapter 10. The Friend Within. Laozi and the Flow of Non-Resistance. Laozi, the ancient Chinese philosopher and author of the Tao Te Ching, watched rivers more than scrolls. He believed wisdom wasn't found in force but in flow. Water is fluid, soft, and yielding, he wrote, but water will wear away rock, which is rigid and cannot yield. To Laozi, resistance wasn't strength, it was struggle. True power came from alignment with the natural rhythm of life. That's hard to accept in a culture built on pushing. We're taught to hustle harder, fight through, grind until it bends. Anything less is weakness. But what if resistance isn't always noble? What if some of our deepest stress comes from fighting the very things we need to accept? Think about how much of your energy goes into wishing things were different. You resist the traffic, the delay, the person who didn't act the way you wanted. You replay conversations, anticipate outcomes, argue with reality. Resistance becomes a reflex. We brace, push, control, but Laozi would ask, what if you let go? Not to give up, but to give in, to move with rather than against. This isn't passivity, it's presence. Non-resistance isn't about surrendering your values, it's about surrendering your illusion of control. You still act, but you act in harmony with what is, not in denial of it. A tree that doesn't bend in the wind snaps, a mind that doesn't adapt breaks. There's a calm strength in non-resistance. It shows up in conversations where you choose to listen rather than dominate, in transitions where you choose to trust rather than panic, in plans that shift, and instead of fighting change, you flow with it. You adjust, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Consider a moment where something didn't go your way, a missed opportunity, a sudden change, an unmet expectation. The tension you felt wasn't just disappointment. It was the collision between what you wanted and what actually happened. That gap is where suffering often leaves. Flow closes the gap, not by erasing desire, but by loosening attachment. Laozi taught that when you align with the Tao, the natural way, you stop forcing and start flowing. You become like water, patient, persistent, adaptable. You take the shape of the moment without losing your essence. You move around obstacles instead of smashing into them. And in doing so, you conserve your energy for what truly matters. This doesn't mean silence in the face of injustice. It means choosing the most effective path. Sometimes that's action. Sometimes it's waiting. Sometimes it's letting things unfold. Flow doesn't mean apathy. It means clarity. You know what you can influence and what you must release. There's a reason stress melts in nature: a walk by the ocean, a forest trail, a mountain breeze. Nature doesn't rush. It doesn't strive. It simply exists fully, without needing to control. Laozi saw that and mirrored it back to us as an invitation, not to be less human, but to be more harmonious. In your daily life, you can practice flow by noticing where you clench, in thought, in conversation, in expectation. Then breathe. Ask, can I soften here? Not to quit, but to cooperate, with reality, with timing, with truth. That's how you become your own ally, instead of your own opponent. Flow doesn't always feel like winning, but it always feels like peace. Flow isn't giving up, it's moving in harmony with reality. Non-resistance frees energy for clarity and wise action. Like water, true strength is found in adaptability. Where in your life are you forcing something that might be better served by flow? Identify one area of resistance today. Instead of pushing, ask, what would it look like to move with this instead of against it? Chapter 11. Decisions with Depth. Spinoza and the Logic of Emotion. Baruch Spinoza, the 17th century philosopher and lens grinder, believed something radical for his time, that emotion and reason were not enemies, but partners. Most of us are taught to think of logic as clean and cold, and emotion as messy and impulsive. But Spinoza saw them as different expressions of the same force, the mind striving to understand itself. He didn't write from an ivory tower. He was excommunicated from his Jewish community, rejected by many of his peers, and lived in near isolation. But in that solitude he wrote about joy, love, peace, and clarity. His insight was this: emotions aren't random. They're signals. They arise from how we interpret the world, and they can guide us, if we understand their origins. Modern decision-making often divides us. We either go with our gut and call it intuition, or we suppress our feelings to appear rational. But both approaches are incomplete. Spinoza would ask, what if your emotions are simply your beliefs in motion? If fear shows up, what assumption is driving it? If joy arises, what truth are you living in alignment with? Rather than ignoring feelings or being ruled by them, he invites us to trace them, to examine the thought beneath the feeling and the desire beneath the thought. Consider a moment when you made a rushed decision out of panic. Maybe it was a text you regretted, a purchase you didn't need, a job you stayed in too long. In hindsight, the emotion felt irrational, but to Spinoza, no emotion is irrational, only misunderstood. Every feeling has a cause, and when we pause to find that cause, we reclaim power. This isn't easy work. It takes patience to sit with a difficult feeling and ask, what belief is this rooted in? For example, jealousy might stem from the belief that love is scarce. Anger might come from the belief that your boundaries don't matter. Once you uncover the root, the emotion becomes a message, not a master. Spinoza also spoke of active emotions and passive emotions. Passive emotions happen when you're at the mercy of your circumstances. Active emotions arise when you understand the cause and can respond freely. That distinction is everything. It's the difference between reacting and responding, between being pulled by life or participating in it with awareness. Imagine approaching a big decision, ending a relationship, changing careers, moving to a new place. The emotional weight can feel overwhelming. But instead of choosing based on fear or suppressing the fear altogether, you pause. You explore. What values are at stake? What beliefs are shaping this fear? What would alignment look like? Now, your decision isn't emotionless, it's emotionally intelligent. In a world that tells you to follow your heart or trust your logic, Spinoza offers a more nuanced path. Follow your heart, but understand what it's saying. Trust your logic, but let it be informed by the full spectrum of your experience. Emotion and reason, when integrated, produce decisions that are not only wise but whole. This isn't about being perfectly balanced at every moment. It's about building the habit of inquiry. When emotions rise, don't suppress or indulge, get curious. And when you act from the calm center where insight and feeling meet. That's the birthplace of wise choices. Spinoza didn't seek to eliminate emotion, he sought to understand it. And in that understanding he found not chaos but clarity. Emotions are rooted in beliefs, understand them to reclaim power. Wise decisions come from integrating reason with emotional awareness. Clarity grows when you treat emotions as signals, not obstacles. What emotion keeps showing up for you, and what belief might be underneath it? The next time you feel a strong emotion, pause, ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? Then decide from that awareness. Chapter 12. The Philosopher's Way, How to Practice, Not Just Preach. You've read about emperors and outcasts, sages and skeptics, rebels and rulers. You've seen how ancient wisdom survives not because it's old, but because it still works. Yet the most important step isn't learning what they taught, it's living it. Philosophy isn't a bookshelf trophy, it's a way of being. And the philosopher's way begins where the reading ends. It starts in small, unnoticed moments, choosing silence when you want to lash out, asking why before you say yes, saying no when the crowd nods yes, walking away from what once defined you, reaching out when you'd rather withdraw. These are not grand gestures, they are acts of clarity, they are practice. And practice is everything. We often wait for transformation to feel dramatic. But real change is subtle. It happens between breaths, between thoughts, between the impulse and the response. You pause, you notice, you choose. That's where wisdom begins, not in having the right quote, but in remembering it when it matters most. The philosopher's way is not a destination. It's a posture. It means staying curious when answers tempt you. It means holding values that cost you something. It means treating discomfort as a teacher, not a threat. And it means waking up each day and asking, what kind of person do I want to be in this moment? Some days you'll fall short. You'll snap, avoid, distract, forget. That's part of the path too. No one, not even Marcus Aurelius or Seneca or Laozi, lived every day perfectly. But they returned. They reviewed. They adjusted. They understood that a good life isn't measured by perfection, it's measured by direction. Your direction is shaped by your attention. What do you give your focus to? What do you let define your day? The philosopher trains their attention like an artist sharpens a blade, not rigidly, but intentionally. They notice the patterns. They interrupt the ones that steal peace. They cultivate the ones that deepen joy. You've also learned that thinking like a philosopher means engaging with life, not escaping it. It's not hiding behind theories. It's asking, where does this apply to me? Whether in conflict, ambition, grief, or growth, the philosopher brings the same tools: reflection, resilience, and radical honesty. Philosophy, without action, is a museum piece, beautiful, but untouched. To bring it to life, you don't need more study, you need more presence. Noticing your reactions, catching your assumptions. Stepping into the pause between knowing and doing, that's where the book becomes real. That's where your life becomes the practice. And you don't do this alone. Every choice you make affects someone else. The way you speak, spend, listen, lead, those are teachings too. Maybe no one will quote you. Maybe your moments won't go viral. But the people around you will feel your integrity. Your children, your friends, your partner, your team. You become a lighthouse, not by preaching, but by practicing in the dark. You'll know you're on the path not because life gets easier, but because your response to life becomes deeper. Not perfect, not always calm, but clear, rooted, aligned. You'll begin to sense when you've left your values and how to return. That's the real discipline, returning again and again. The philosopher's way is patient. It's not about always knowing what to do. It's about being willing to ask, reflect, and adjust, to live a life where your actions speak louder than your thoughts, to stop performing meaning and start embodying it. You don't need to quote Plato to be a philosopher, you just need to live like your values matter. Philosophy is practice, not knowledge, but consistent alignment. Small daily choices shape the direction of a meaningful life. You become a lighthouse not by perfection, but by integrity. Where in your daily life can you begin practicing one idea you've learned from this book? Choose one principle from any chapter. Apply it today, not perfectly, but consciously, then reflect on what you noticed. Take care and be well.